Why were 50 military working dogs barking like the world was ending? The sound tore through the Virginia beach morning, a savage chorus that could break bones if sound had weight. Chain link rattled. Concrete trembled. Inside the Naval Special Warfare K-9 training facility, handlers covered their ears and wondered what had triggered the kennel blocks. But they were asking the wrong question. It wasn't what had arrived. It was who. She stood at the main gate, maybe 5'3" in worn sneakers, maybe 115 soaking wet. Faded gray jacket hanging loose on narrow shoulders. Brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Eyes cast downward like she'd spent a lifetime avoiding confrontation. The application folder under Chief Petty Officer Derek Vance's arm said her name was Ivory Lawson. It didn't say much else. Derek grabbed a push broom from the supply cart and threw it. The wooden handle cracked against concrete, skidding to a stop inches from her feet. "Pick it up." His voice carried over the barking, rough and testing. Behind him, 15 handlers had gathered for the Monday morning show. Lieutenant Amber Nash examined her manicure. Petty Officer First Class Caleb Reeves whistled low and long. Phones came out. This was entertainment. Ivory didn't flinch. She stood there, small and silent, while Derek's shadow fell across her face. "You know what your job is here?" She nodded once. "Cleaning kennels." He pronounced each word slowly, like she might not understand English. 50 dogs every single day. "You understand what that means?" Another small nod. Amber sauntered closer, lieutenant's bars gleaming in the sunlight. "Derek, I don't think she speaks English. Maybe we should get a translator." She studied Ivory like something unpleasant stuck to her boot. Where exactly did HR find this one? Civilian contractor pool, Derek answered without looking away from the new hire. Bottom of the barrel, apparently. Laughter rippled through the assembled handlers. Petty Officer Second Class Mason Briggs angled his phone for a better shot of the humiliation in progress. This would make good content for the group chat. Ivory bent down, picked up the broom. "Good girl." Derek's lip curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Now you'll start with Alpha Block. That's where we keep our most enthusiastic residents." He pointed toward reinforced kennels where Belgian Malinois paced behind steel mesh, amber eyes tracking every movement. Oh, and a friendly warning. The last janitor lost 2 fingers to Rex. He's the big one at the end. Black muzzle, likes to play. Ivory's gaze flickered toward Alpha Block for a fraction of a second. Then she adjusted her grip on the broom handle and started walking. No protest, no questions, no fear in her eyes that anyone could detect. Derek exchanged a glance with Amber. $20 says she doesn't last till lunch. "I give her an hour," Caleb called out. "Rex hates everybody." Master Sergeant Silas Turner stood apart from the group, leaning against the equipment shed with his arms folded. At 53, he'd been handling military working dogs longer than most of these handlers had been alive. His weathered face revealed nothing as he watched the small woman walk toward Alpha Block, but something in his posture shifted. Something that looked almost like attention. The barking intensified as Ivory approached the first kennel. A massive German shepherd threw itself against the chain link, foam gathering at the corners of its mouth. The noise was deafening. A wall of sound designed to break the human spirit. Ivory kept walking. Second kennel, third, fourth. Each dog more aggressive than the last. Each barrier rattling under the assault of powerful bodies and sharper teeth. Then she reached Rex. The Belgian Malinois was everything Derek had promised and worse. 85 pounds of muscle and malice, bred from a lineage that traced back to the first DEVGRU combat dogs. His record included 3 handler injuries, 2 escape attempts, and 1 incident that remained classified at levels most people didn't know existed. Rex launched himself at the kennel door the moment Ivory's shadow crossed his territory. His bark was different from the others, deeper, more guttural, a sound that spoke of violence barely contained. And then it stopped. Rex's front paws hit the ground, his massive head tilted to one side. The perpetual growl died in his throat, replaced by something no one at the facility had ever witnessed. Silence. The dog sat down, ears flattened against his skull. His tail, a tail that had never wagged for anyone in 4 years of service, began a slow, uncertain sweep across the concrete floor. Ivory paused, just for a heartbeat. Then she continued toward the supply closet at the end of the row, leaving Rex staring after her with an expression that could only be described as recognition. "What the hell?" Derek's voice trailed off. Amber stepped closer to the kennel, heels clicking against pavement. Rex immediately lunged at the barrier, teeth bared, that familiar murderous intent restored in full. She stumbled backward, nearly losing her balance. "Must be wearing some kind of pheromone spray," Caleb suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. "Or maybe Rex is finally going soft." Silas Turner said nothing, but his eyes hadn't left Ivory since she'd picked up that broom. And the furrow between his brows had deepened into something approaching genuine curiosity. The morning crawled forward in a haze of bleach and animal waste. Ivory moved through Alpha Block with methodical efficiency, cleaning each kennel without incident while the handlers watched from a safe distance. Every dog she approached went quiet. Every snarl died before it fully formed. It was as if she carried some invisible shield that the animals could sense, but the humans could not comprehend. Mason Briggs got bored around 900 hours. He'd been assigned to shadow the new janitor, Derek's orders, but watching someone shovel waste wasn't exactly stimulating entertainment. When Ivory entered the last kennel in Alpha Block to clean around the water basin, Mason saw his opportunity. The lock clicked shut with a satisfying metallic snap. He walked away whistling, phone already in hand to text the good news to the group chat. Inside the kennel, Ivory straightened. The dog occupying this space was named Titan, a German shepherd with a bite force measured at 430 pounds per square inch and a temperament that had resulted in his removal from active deployment. He was, according to every evaluation on file, impossible to rehabilitate. Titan rose from his corner, hackles raised, lips peeling back to reveal teeth that could crush bone like kindling. Ivory set down her brush. She turned to face him, movement slow and deliberate. No fear flickered across her features. No panic quickened her breath. She simply looked at the dog the way one might regard an old friend encountered after years apart. Titan advanced, one step, two. His growl filled the enclosed space like thunder. Ivory didn't retreat, didn't speak. She lowered herself into a crouch, making herself smaller, less threatening. Her eyes met Titan's directly, a challenge in canine terms, a declaration. The German shepherd lunged and stopped. His muzzle was inches from her throat when something in his brain overrode every trained instinct. The growl faded. The tension bled from his massive frame. Titan whined once, a sound of confusion and something deeper, then sank to his belly and laid his head across Ivory's knee. 10 feet away, hidden behind an equipment rack, veterinary technician Fern Cooper watched with her hand pressed over her mouth. She'd been on her way to administer Titan's weekly supplements when she'd spotted Mason locking the kennel door with someone still inside. By the time she'd found the spare key, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely fit it into the lock. But when the door swung open, there was no carnage, no screaming. Just a small woman kneeling on concrete with one of the facility's most dangerous animals resting peacefully against her. Fern stood frozen in the doorway, unable to process what she was seeing. Ivory looked up. Their eyes met. And in that moment, Fern saw something she would spend the next 3 weeks trying to understand. Not fear, not surprise, just a quiet, bone-deep exhaustion. The kind that comes from carrying weight no one else can see. What makes someone invisible? Not their size or their clothes or the way they keep their eyes down. It's the stories people choose not to ask about. The wounds they decide aren't worth noticing. Ivory Lawson had become very good at being invisible. She'd had 8 years to practice. By noon, word had spread through the facility like wildfire. The new janitor hadn't just survived Alpha Block. She'd done something impossible. Something that defied every protocol, every training manual, every reasonable expectation of how military working dogs behaved around strangers. Derek Vance stood in Commander Hayes's office, trying to explain what he'd witnessed without sounding like he'd lost his mind. Sir, I'm telling you, it's not natural. Rex has put 3 handlers in medical. Titan was scheduled for euthanasia next month because nobody could get within 5 feet of him. And she just walks in there like she's checking on houseplants. Commander Richard Hayes was a career SEAL who'd seen combat in 3 continents and political battles in twice as many Pentagon conference rooms. Very little surprised him anymore, but the security footage playing on his monitor was giving him pause. Show me the gate camera again. Derek rewound the footage to 0700 hours. There. The moment Ivory approached the main gate, listen to that. The barking started before she was even visible on camera, before any human could have seen her. The dogs knew she was coming. Hayes leaned forward, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Run a background check, full spectrum. I want to know everything about Ivory Lawson. Where she came from, where she's been, why a woman with no listed military service knows how to handle combat dogs like she's been doing it her entire life. Already in progress, sir. Derek hesitated. There's something else. What? The tattoo on her left forearm. I only caught a glimpse when she was reaching for a mop bucket, but it looked like stars. 7 of them, in a specific pattern. Hayes's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Get me that background check. Now. In the facility's break room, Ivory sat alone at a corner table with a brown paper bag lunch she'd brought from home. Peanut butter sandwich, apple, bottle of water. The other handlers gave her a wide berth, clustering near the coffee machine and speaking in low voices punctuated by occasional glances in her direction. Only Silas Turner approached. He set his tray down across from her without asking permission. You mind? Ivory shook her head once. Silas settled into his chair with the careful movements of a man whose body remembered every hard landing, every long march, every price paid for a life in service. I've been working with these dogs for 30 years. Seen handlers from every branch, every background. Special Forces, Marine Raiders, DEVGRU, SAR teams. Never seen anything like what you did this morning. Ivory took a small bite of her sandwich, chewed slowly, swallowed, didn't respond. That doesn't bother you, being tested like that. Being humiliated. She met his eyes for the first time. Her voice, when it finally came, was quiet but steady. People see what they expect to see. Can't control that. Only thing you can control is whether you let it change who you are. Silas studied her for a long moment. That tattoo on your arm, those stars, what do they mean? Ivory's hand moved reflexively to her left forearm, covering the ink beneath her sleeve. People I served with. People who didn't make it home. 7 stars. 7 souls. The math wasn't hard, but the weight behind those words was something Silas recognized. He'd carried similar weight for longer than he cared to remember. What unit? She stood up, gathering her lunch bag. Appreciate the conversation, Sergeant Turner. But I'm just here to clean kennels, nothing more. She walked away before he could press further, leaving Silas alone with his coffee and a growing certainty that nothing about Ivory Lawson was what it appeared to be. The afternoon brought new complications. Derek had assigned Ivory to Bravo Block, a section housing dogs in various stages of medical recovery and behavioral rehabilitation. Easier animals, he'd said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe his own words. Bravo Block included Storm, a female Belgian Malinois who'd returned from deployment with PTSD so severe she attacked her own reflection. Bravo Block included Havoc, who'd survived an IED blast that killed his handler and now flinched at every loud noise. Bravo Block included Ghost, Echo, and Ranger, each carrying wounds both physical and psychological that standard treatment couldn't seem to heal. Ivory approached Storm's kennel with the same quiet confidence she'd shown in Alpha Block. The Malinois was pressed against the back wall, body trembling, eyes wild with memories of things humans couldn't see. Soft whining sounds escaped her throat, sounds of distress that had been echoing through this kennel for 6 months straight. Ivory knelt down outside the chain link. Didn't try to enter. Didn't speak. She simply breathed. Long, slow breaths that created a rhythm, a pattern, something steady in Storm's fractured world. Minutes passed. The whining gradually decreased. Storm's trembling eased. Her wild eyes found Ivory's face and something in them shifted. Recognition. Not of a person, but of a feeling, of understanding. You've been there too, haven't you? Fern Cooper's voice came from behind. The vet tech had been following Ivory all day, trying to make sense of what she was witnessing. Those dogs, they know you've seen what they've seen, felt what they feel. Ivory stood up slowly, still watching Storm. Every soldier comes home carrying something. Humans, we get to hide it, pretend we're fine, put on uniforms and medals and smiles. But dogs can't lie about what they've survived. It's all right there in their eyes. How do you help them? Fern asked. The question sounded desperate, like she'd been searching for that answer through 6 months of failed treatments and sleepless nights. You don't help them forget. Ivory's voice was gentle. You help them remember they're not alone. That someone understands. That survival isn't something to be ashamed of. Storm moved toward the front of her kennel, pressed her nose against the chain link. And for the first time since returning from deployment, she didn't flinch when a human reached out. Ivory's fingers found the Malinois' muzzle through the metal barrier. A connection formed, simple, profound, built on foundations of shared trauma and mutual recognition. Fern wiped at her eyes quickly, embarrassed by the tears that had formed. Who are you? Just someone who cleans kennels. Ivory turned away from Storm's kennel, but there was something else in her posture now, a subtle tension, a awareness, like she'd felt a shift in the air, like she knew something was coming. In Commander Hayes' office, the background check had arrived. Derek and Silas stood on either side of the desk while Hayes scrolled through page after page of classified documentation. His expression grew darker with each section. "Tell me what you're seeing, sir," Derek requested. Hayes looked up. "What I'm seeing is a file that's been scrubbed, redacted, sanitized by someone with authority I don't even have clearance to question." Ivory Lawson, according to official records, spent 8 years working in veterinary clinics across the Midwest. Quiet life, civilian existence, no military service, no deployments, no combat experience. Then explain the dogs, Derek pressed. Explain the tattoo. Explain how she moves like she's been in more firefights than most of our handlers combined. Hayes turned his monitor so they could see the screen. There's one document they couldn't fully redact, an after-action report from Kandahar province, 8 years ago. A DEVGRUK-9 unit was conducting counterinsurgency operations when they got hit. Ambush, coordinated attack, 7 handlers killed, 56 military working dogs lost, facility completely destroyed. Silas leaned closer, reading the sparse details that hadn't been blacked out. It says here the attack was personal. Targeted, someone knew those handlers, knew their routines, knew exactly when and where to strike. What happened to the survivors? Derek asked. Hayes closed the file. According to this, there were no survivors. Everyone present was killed in action or died in the subsequent fire. Bodies recovered and identified through dental records and DNA. Case closed. Families notified. Memorial services conducted. But that's impossible, Derek said slowly. If everyone died, then who filed the report exactly? Hayes pulled up another document. This one showed a grainy photograph from a military hospital in Germany. A woman, face partially obscured by bandages, lying unconscious in intensive care. The date stamp read 3 weeks after the Kandahar attack. The name on the medical chart was illegible, but the tattoo on her left forearm was crystal clear. 7 stars in a specific constellation pattern. The same 7 stars Ivory Lawson wore today. She's not just someone who cleans kennels, Silas said quietly. She's someone who survived something that killed everyone else. Someone who's been hiding for 8 years. The question is why? Have you ever noticed how secrets change shape depending on who's carrying them? Some people wear their secrets like armor. Others carry them like open wounds. Ivory Lawson carried hers like both. Tuesday morning arrived with fog rolling in from the Atlantic, turning the K-9 facility into something dreamlike and strange. Ivory showed up at 0600 hours, same faded jacket, same worn sneakers, same quiet determination. But the handlers weren't laughing anymore. They watched her with something new in their eyes. Uncertainty. Maybe even the beginning of respect. Derek had called a mandatory meeting before morning duties. All 15 handlers crammed into the conference room, while Commander Hayes stood at the front with a PowerPoint presentation he hadn't explained yet. "What you're about to see is classified," Hayes began. "The fact that I'm showing you this at all violates about 6 different regulations, but recent developments have made it necessary." He clicked to the first slide. The image showed a K-9 facility in Afghanistan, not unlike their own but built for forward deployment. Temporary structures, reinforced positions, dogs and handlers preparing for operations in hostile territory. This was Naval Special Warfare K-9 Forward Operating Base Kandahar, operational from 2012 to 2016, home to 7 elite handlers and 56 military working dogs, breeding program, training center, and deployment hub all in one. Amber Nash shifted in her seat. Was past tense. Hayes clicked to the next slide, the same facility but now reduced to rubble and ash, bodies covered with American flags, burn patterns suggesting accelerant use and controlled detonation. 8 years ago, this facility was attacked, not by Taliban, not by insurgents conducting random violence, by someone who knew exactly what they were targeting, someone with insider knowledge of shift changes, security protocols, handler routines. The attack killed 7 K-9 operators and destroyed nearly all the dogs. The room went silent. Caleb Reeves stared at the screen with his jaw tight. Mason Briggs had stopped fidgeting with his phone. Even Amber looked shaken. "Who did it?" Derek asked. "We still don't know," Hayes admitted. "The investigation ran for 3 years, hit dead ends at every turn. Whoever planned this attack covered their tracks with professional precision. But here's what we do know." He clicked again. This time the slide showed a hospital room, a woman barely visible beneath bandages and medical equipment. One survivor escaped the initial blast, made it to a defensive position with approximately 50 of the dogs. Held out for 6 hours while the facility burned and enemy combatants searched for survivors. When rescue forces finally arrived, they found her unconscious. Severe smoke inhalation, shrapnel wounds, degree burns across 40% of her body. The dogs had formed a perimeter around her. Living shield. Even the ones who were injured, who should have fled, who had every reason to save themselves, stayed, protected her until the very end. "How many dogs survived?" Fern Cooper's voice came from the back of the room. She'd been invited to the briefing at Hayes's request. 50, Hayes said quietly. 50 military working dogs surrounded her when rescue arrived. 43 were injured. 17 died from their wounds over the following weeks, but they bought her enough time. She lived. Silas Turner leaned forward. "What happened to her after she recovered?" Hayes pulled up the next slide. It showed transfer orders, medical discharge paperwork, relocation documents, all heavily redacted. She disappeared, officially transferred to veteran rehabilitation programs. Unofficially, she vanished from every database, every record, every system we use to track military personnel. Someone with serious authority wanted her hidden, wanted her protected, or wanted her forgotten. Derek's hands had curled into fists on the conference table. "Why are you telling us this now?" "Because," Hayes said, turning to face them directly, "I believe that survivor is currently working in our facility. I believe the woman you've been treating as a cleaning lady is the same person who survived Kandahar. And I believe the 50 dogs that protected her 8 years ago passed something down to their descendants. The dogs in our kennels." Amber's face had gone pale. "That's impossible. Genetics don't work that way. You can't inherit memory." Silas stood up, his voice carrying the weight of 3 decades of experience. "You're wrong, Lieutenant. I've seen it. Watched it happen across generations of military working dogs. They carry something. Call it instinct, call it genetic memory, call it whatever helps you sleep at night. But those animals know things they shouldn't be able to know. Recognize threats, identify friendlies, react to situations they've never encountered before. Like their ancestors, are whispering warnings through their blood." Hayes nodded. "Every dog in our facility traces back to the Kandahar breeding program. Rex's sire was one of the dogs who survived that attack. Titan's dam was there. Storm's entire bloodline runs through that compound. If they're recognizing Ivory, if they're responding to her with that kind of immediate trust and protection, it's because somewhere in their genetic makeup they remember. They remember who saved them, who fought for them, who refused to leave them behind even when staying meant dying. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then Mason spoke up, his voice small and ashamed. "We locked her in a kennel with Titan. Thought it would be funny. Thought she'd panic, scream, maybe quit. We were hazing someone who survived things we can't even imagine." "Yes," Hayes said flatly, "you were. And now you're going to make it right." "How?" Derek asked. "By learning," Hayes replied, "by becoming the kind of handlers those dogs deserve. By understanding that the person teaching you might not wear rank or ribbons, but she's earned more respect than anyone in this room." He clicked to the final slide. It showed Ivory's face from the gate camera. Small, quiet, eyes downcast. But in the background, barely visible, you could see Rex watching her through his kennel. And in the dog's expression, if you looked close enough, you could see recognition. You could see loyalty. You could see something that transcended training or conditioning or any rational explanation. "She's not just a survivor," Hayes said. "She's a testament to courage, to sacrifice, to the bonds formed in fire that never fully break. And starting today, you will treat her accordingly. Is that understood, sir?" "Yes, sir." The response came in unison, but it carried weight now. Awareness. The beginning of something that might eventually become worthy of the word respect. When the meeting ended, the handlers filed out in silence. But Derek hung back, waiting until only he and Hayes remained. "What do we do if she doesn't want to be found out? What if she came here specifically to stay invisible?" "Then we respect that too," Hayes said. "We give her space. We give her dignity. We give her the choice of when and if she wants her story known. But Derek, I need you to understand something." He turned to face his chief petty officer directly. "That woman walked back into a facility full of the descendants of dogs she watched die. She came back to a place that must carry more painful memories than either of us can imagine. That takes a kind of courage most people will never possess." "Why would she do that?" Derek asked. "Why come back?" Hayes looked out the window toward the kennel blocks where Ivory was already at work, moving between the dogs with quiet efficiency. "Maybe because she needs to heal something. Maybe because she's the only one who can teach these animals what their ancestors knew. Or maybe," he said quietly, "because she's been alone for 8 years and this is the only place that feels like home, even if home is built on ashes." Out in Bravo Block, Ivory was cleaning Storm's kennel when she felt it. That familiar prickling at the back of her neck. The awareness that comes from surviving situations where awareness meant the difference between life and death. Someone was watching her. She turned slowly. Found Echo sitting outside the kennel fence, 20 feet away, perfectly still. The man who shouldn't be alive. The brother who was supposed to be dead. 8 years she'd believed it. 8 years of guilt and grief and survivor's shame. 8 years of thinking she was the only one who'd made it out of Kandahar. And now he was here, real, breathing, looking at her with eyes that held the same shock, the same disbelief, the same impossible recognition. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. Storm pressed against Ivory's leg, whining softly, sensing the emotional earthquake happening in the space between two people who'd been torn apart by fire and found each other on the other side of survival. Finally, Echo stood, took one step forward, then another. His voice, when it came, was rough with 8 years of believing he'd failed her. Ivory, just her name, nothing more, but it carried everything. All the questions, all the grief, all the years of thinking the other was gone. She nodded once, the same small nod she'd given Derek when asked if she understood her job. But this time it meant something different. This time it meant, "Yes, I'm real. Yes, I survived. Yes, I thought you were dead too." Echo's hands were shaking. She could see them trembling even from 20 feet away. "I looked for you, after the hospital, after they said you'd been transferred. I searched every rehabilitation facility, every veterans program, every possible place you could have gone. You vanished." "They made me vanish," Ivory said quietly. "Said it was for my protection. Said the people who attacked Kandahar might still be looking for survivors. Said the best way to stay alive was to disappear. And you believed them. What choice did I have?" She gestured around the kennel block. Everyone was gone. the handlers, the dogs, the entire program we'd built. I was the only one left, or so I thought. What does it mean to be haunted? Not by ghosts, by the living, by the people you thought you'd lost who suddenly reappear and force you to confront everything you've buried. Echo moved closer to the kennel fence. Storm watched him carefully, not aggressive but alert, protective. The way military working dogs protect the people they've decided belong to them. I was on patrol when it happened, Echo said. 2 miles out from the compound with Ranger. We were sweeping a village for weapons caches. When we got the distress call, when we heard the explosions, I ran. Faster than I'd ever moved in my life. But by the time I got back, everything was burning. His voice broke on that last word. Broke the way things break when they've been held together too long under impossible pressure. Ivory set down her cleaning supplies, stepped closer to the fence. I remember the fire, remember pulling dogs out of the kennels, the ones who were still alive, the ones who were too injured to run but refused to leave. She touched her left forearm where the 7 stars marked her skin. I counted, kept counting, tried to account for everyone, handlers, dogs, everyone I'd served with, everyone I'd promised to bring home, but the smoke was so thick, the heat so intense, I couldn't find them all. Couldn't save them all. You saved 50, Echo said. 50 dogs who should have died, who would have died if you hadn't stayed, if you hadn't fought. I found the after-action reports. Classified files I wasn't supposed to access. They said you held a defensive position for 6 hours, against enemy combatants searching for survivors, with smoke inhalation so severe you should have been unconscious, with burns that should have killed you. I didn't have a choice, she whispered. They were my family, the handlers, the dogs, everyone who'd built that program from nothing, everyone who trusted me to have their backs. How could I leave? How could I run when they were still dying? Echo's hand reached through the fence, stopped just short of touching her. I thought I'd lost everyone, thought I was the only survivor. They told me you died in the hospital, showed me paperwork, death certificate, everything official and final. I buried an empty casket. Stood at a funeral for someone who wasn't actually dead. Ivory's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for 8 years. I'm sorry. I wanted to find you. Wanted to tell you I was alive. But they said it wasn't safe. Said the attack was too coordinated, too personal. Said someone had to have inside knowledge. Someone we trusted. And until they found out who, I had to stay hidden. Did they ever find out? Echo asked. She shook her head. Investigation went cold. Too many dead ends. Too many protected sources. Whoever planned Kandahar had enough power to bury evidence, redirect inquiries, make entire threads of investigation disappear. After 3 years, they gave up. Told me I could live my life but recommended I stay out of military circles. Stay away from anything connected to K9 programs. Stay invisible. So why are you here? His question was gentle but pointed. Why come back to the one place guaranteed to draw attention? Because, Ivory said, looking around at the kennel blocks, at the 50 dogs carrying the bloodlines of the animals she'd saved, I owe them. The ones who survived. The ones who died protecting me. The ones whose descendants are living in these kennels wondering why they feel compelled to trust a stranger who smells like cleaning supplies and broken promises. Storm whined softly, pressing harder against Ivory's leg. Echo watched the interaction with something like wonder on his face. They know you. Not just Rex or Titan, all of them. I've been watching since yesterday. Every dog you approach goes quiet. Every aggressive behavior stops. It's like they're recognizing something, someone. Their ancestors' sacrifice, Ivory said, gets passed down through generations. Not consciously, not in ways we can measure with brain scans or genetic tests. But these dogs carry memories in their bones, in their instincts, in the part of them that decides who to trust and who to protect. And when I walked through that gate, when they heard my footsteps, when they caught my scent, something in them remembered. Commander Hayes appeared at the end of the kennel block. He stopped when he saw them, taking in the scene with the practiced assessment of someone who'd spent decades reading combat situations. Lieutenant Echo Vance, I wondered when you two would find each other. You knew? Echo turned to face him. Knew he was here. Hayes nodded. Echo arrived 3 days ago. Officially, he's conducting an investigation into training protocols. Unofficially, he's been searching for answers about Kandahar, about what really happened. about whether the attack was truly random or if there's still an active threat. And you didn't think to mention this. Ivory's voice carried an edge now. Didn't think to warn me that someone from my past was walking these halls. Would you have stayed if I had? Hayes asked. Would you have shown up for work knowing Echo was here, knowing the past was about to crash into your carefully constructed present? Probably not. Then I made the right call. Hayes approached the kennel fence. Listen, both of you. I don't know what happened 8 years ago. Don't know who attacked Kandahar or why. Don't know all the details of how you survived or how he survived or how 50 dogs managed to keep you alive long enough for rescue. But I know this. He gestured around the facility. These animals need someone who understands what their ancestors went through. These handlers need someone who can teach them that the dogs they're working with carry legacy and trauma and loyalty that goes deeper than any training manual can explain. I'm just a cleaning lady, Ivory said, but her voice lacked conviction. You're a survivor, Hayes corrected. You're someone who knows what it costs to protect family. And whether you want to admit it or not, this facility is full of your family. Dogs descended from the ones you saved. Handlers who need to learn from someone who's actually been in combat. A program that could benefit from knowledge and experience most people only read about in classified files. I'm not qualified, Ivory protested. I don't have rank, don't have credentials, don't have anything official that would justify me teaching these people. You have something better, Echo said quietly. You have scars, you have survival, you have the kind of wisdom that only comes from making impossible choices in impossible situations. These handlers, they're good, technically proficient, physically capable, but most of them have never deployed, never seen combat, never had to make decisions where wrong means people die and right means living with ghosts forever. They need someone who's been there, someone who knows what it costs. Ivory looked at Storm. At the Belgian Malinois who'd been broken by deployment and couldn't find her way back. At the dog whose eyes still held shadows of things humans couldn't see. I don't know how to teach them, she admitted. Don't know how to put into words what I learned in that compound. How to explain what it means when dogs choose to die protecting you. How to help them understand that every animal in these kennels is more than a weapon or a tool or a resource to be managed. Start with the truth, Hayes said. Tell them what happened, not all at once, not in ways that re-traumatize you, but show them through your work with these dogs what real partnership looks like, what genuine trust means, what it costs to be worthy of the loyalty these animals offer. Derek Vance appeared at the other end of the kennel block, stopped when he saw the gathering. Commander, we've got a situation. What kind of situation? Nash is in the veterinary clinic. One of the newer handlers tried to force Storm into a training exercise. The dog panicked, bit him. Not serious, but enough to draw blood. Amber's calling for Storm to be put down. Ivory's head snapped up. No, her voice was sharp now, definitive. Storm's not aggressive. She's traumatized. There's a difference. Nash doesn't see it that way, Derek said. Says a dog that bites is a liability. Says we can't risk keeping animals that might turn on their handlers. She's wrong. Ivory moved toward the kennel door. Storm didn't attack. She defended herself. There's a massive difference between a dog choosing violence and a dog reacting out of fear. If that handler pushed her past her limits, if he ignored the warning signs she was giving, then the fault lies with the human, not the animal. You going to tell Lieutenant Nash that? Derek asked, something almost like hope in his voice. Ivory pulled open the kennel door. Storm immediately pressed against her side, trembling but trusting. Yeah, I am. She walked past Derek, past Hayes, past Echo with the traumatized Belgian Malinois at her heel. Walked like someone who'd spent 8 years being invisible and had finally remembered what it felt like to be seen. The veterinary clinic was chaos when she arrived. Amber stood in the center, pointing at Storm with barely controlled fury. That animal is a menace. Bit handler Collins without provocation. I want it euthanized today. Storm bit him because he cornered her, Ivory said from the doorway. Every eye in the clinic turned to face her, because he ignored her body language, her warning signals, her obvious distress. Because he treated her like a malfunctioning piece of equipment instead of a living being with PTSD. And who exactly are you to make that assessment? Amber's voice dripped with contempt. The cleaning lady, someone who understands trauma, Ivory replied. Someone who knows what it looks like when a soldier's been pushed past their breaking point. Someone who's watched good people make terrible mistakes because they didn't recognize the warning signs. Storm stepped forward slightly, positioning herself between Ivory and Amber. The message was clear. The dog had chosen her person, had decided who deserved protection and who deserved distance. Amber's face flushed red. Commander Hayes, I demand that you remove this civilian from my clinic and authorize the euthanization of this dangerous animal. No, Hayes stepped into the room. You won't be euthanizing Storm, and you won't be dismissing Ivory's assessment. In fact, as of right now, she's officially being brought on as a consultant for this facility. Specialized training in combat K9 trauma rehabilitation, starting immediately. Amber's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Sir, I'm sorry, Lieutenant, did you just try to argue with a direct order? Hayes's voice went cold. Because it sounded like you were about to question my authority to make personnel decisions in my own facility. Amber went rigid. No, sir. Good. Then you'll report to Ivory's office, which will be setting up in Building 3 first thing tomorrow morning for retraining on proper K9 handling protocols. Dismissed. How do you rebuild trust after it's been shattered? Not in grand gestures, in small moments, in choosing patience over pride, in remembering that healing doesn't follow schedules or timelines or anyone's expectations. The next morning, Ivory found herself in an actual office, desk, computer, nameplate that read K9 Trauma Rehabilitation Specialist. It felt surreal, wrong, like wearing someone else's uniform. Commander Hayes had left a stack of files on her desk. Personnel records for every handler in the facility, behavioral assessments for every dog, training protocols that needed revision, assessment reports from veterinary staff. The work of rebuilding an entire program distilled into manila folders and medical charts. Echo appeared in her doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this. He set one on her desk. Black, no sugar. The way she'd drunk it in Kandahar when they'd pulled endless shifts training new handlers and integrating fresh breeding stock. You remembered. I remember everything, he said quietly. Remember how you'd stay up all night with the dogs who were struggling. How you'd sleep in the kennels if one of them was sick or scared. How you used to say the measure of a handler wasn't how well their dog performed, but how well they understood what the dog needed. Ivory wrapped her hands around the warm cup. That feels like a different life. Different person. You're the same person, Echo said, just carrying more weight, more scars, more reasons to stay invisible. But you're still the woman who stayed in a burning compound because leaving meant abandoning family. Amber Nash appeared in the hallway, stopped when she saw Echo, seemed to be debating whether to enter or retreat. Come in, Lieutenant. Ivory's voice was calm, professional. No hint of the humiliation Amber had participated in just days earlier. Amber stepped inside, posture rigid, reporting as ordered. Ivory gestured to a chair. Sit, please. The please seemed to catch Amber off guard. She sat slowly, like expecting a trap. I'm not here to punish you, Ivory began. Not here to make you feel small or stupid or ashamed. I'm here because Commander Hayes believes this facility can be better, that our handlers can develop deeper understanding of the animals they work with, that the dogs can receive the kind of care and respect their service deserves. Amber's jaw was tight. I was wrong about Storm, about how I treated you, about everything. Ivory nodded. Yes, you were, but wrong doesn't mean irredeemable, doesn't mean you can't learn, doesn't mean you're not capable of becoming the kind of handler these dogs need. Why are you being nice to me? Amber's voice cracked slightly. I was cruel, participated in hazing you, called you names, laughed while they tested whether you'd break. Because, Ivory said gently, I've seen what happens when people let their worst moments define them forever. Seen good soldiers destroyed by shame and guilt. Seen talented handlers quit because they made mistakes and nobody taught them how to recover. I don't want that for you. Don't want that for anyone in this facility. Amber's hands were shaking now. What do you want from me? To learn. Ivory pulled out Storm's file. This is a Belgian Malinois with severe PTSD, deployed twice, saw her handler killed in an IED blast, brought home and immediately put into training rotation without proper decompression. Every loud noise triggers her, every sudden movement, every situation that reminds her of the worst day of her life. When Handler Collins cornered her in the training yard, what do you think Storm saw? Amber's voice was barely a whisper. The enemy, a threat. The same situation that got her handler killed, exactly. Ivory leaned forward. Storm didn't bite because she's vicious. She bit because she was terrified, because her brain, still trapped in combat mode, told her she had to fight or die. That's not a training problem. That's a trauma problem. And you can't fix trauma by punishing the traumatized. How do you fix it? Amber asked. Slowly, Ivory said, with patience, with understanding, with the recognition that healing isn't linear. Some days Storm will make progress, some days she'll regress. The goal isn't to force her to be the dog she was before deployment. She can't be. That version of her died when her handler did. The goal is to help her become a new version, one that can exist with the trauma instead of being consumed by it. Can she ever work again? Maybe, maybe not. Ivory's voice was honest. Some combat dogs recover enough to redeploy. Others need to retire. The measure of our success isn't whether we can return them to active duty. It's whether we can give them quality of life, whether we can help them find peace. Amber wiped at her eyes. I didn't understand, didn't realize what these animals carry. Now you do, Ivory said. And that awareness, that knowledge makes you more valuable than before, makes you capable of being the kind of handler who sees beyond performance metrics and mission readiness, who understands that every dog in these kennels is a living being with needs and fears and trauma that deserves respect. Over the following days, word spread through the facility. Ivory wasn't just the cleaning lady, wasn't just a survivor of Kandahar. She was someone worth learning from, someone whose quiet strength spoke louder than any speech or presentation. Derek Vance signed up for her first training session. Then Caleb Reeves. Then Fern Cooper from veterinary. Then Mason Briggs, the same handler who'd locked her in Titan's kennel, showed up with a notebook and genuine humility. Ivory's sessions didn't look like traditional training. She didn't lecture, didn't use PowerPoint presentations or technical terminology. She took handlers into the kennels and showed them how to read a dog's body language, how to recognize stress signals before they escalated, how to build trust through consistency and respect rather than dominance and control. She worked with Rex, the Belgian Malinois who'd recognized her first, showed the handlers how he responded to calm presence versus aggressive commands, how his aggression was actually fear, how beneath the snarling and lunging lived a dog who desperately wanted connection but had learned humans were threats. Derek watched with something like awe as Ivory sat in Rex's kennel, the massive dog resting his head on her lap. The same animal who'd sent 3 handlers to medical was now peaceful, content, trusting. How do you do that? Derek asked. I don't do anything, Ivory replied. I just recognize what he needs, what he's asking for. Rex doesn't want to be aggressive, doesn't enjoy violence. He's scared, alone, carrying memories of handlers who treated him like a weapon. When someone finally sees him as a living being worthy of gentleness, his entire demeanor changes. Can we teach that? Derek's voice was earnest now. Can we help the other handlers develop that kind of awareness? You already are, Ivory said, by being here, by asking questions, by being willing to admit you don't know everything. That's the first step toward becoming someone these dogs can trust. Silas Turner watched from the kennel entrance. The master sergeant hadn't signed up for formal training. Didn't need to. He'd been doing this work for 30 years. But he came anyway, stood at the periphery and observed. Learned things his decades of experience had somehow missed. After one session, he approached Ivory. You're teaching them what I spent 3 decades trying to figure out. She looked up from the training notes she was making. What's that? That these dogs aren't soldiers. They're not tools. They're not weapons we deploy and forget about. They're family. And family deserves more than we've been giving them. Silas nodded slowly. I'm retiring next month. Commander Hayes asked me to recommend someone to take over the senior handler position. I told him it should be you. I'm not a handler, Ivory protested. I'm a consultant, temporary, just here to help rebuild the program and then disappear again. You can't disappear, Silas said. Not from this. These dogs won't let you. These handlers won't let you. Hell, Echo definitely won't let you. She felt her face flush. Echo and I, we're family, Silas finished. I know, everyone knows, the way he looks at you. The way you orbit each other even when you're pretending to maintain professional distance. That's not colleagues, that's not old friends. That's two people who survived hell together and found each other on the other side. Ivory didn't deny it. Couldn't. The truth was written in every interaction, every shared coffee, every moment when she'd look up from her work and find Echo watching her with eyes that held 8 years of grief and relief and complicated feelings neither of them knew how to name. He thinks he failed you, Silas continued. Thinks he should have been there, should have saved you, should have prevented Kandahar or died trying. That's not his fault. The attack happened when he was on patrol, miles away. Nothing he could have done. Knowing that and feeling that are different things, Silas said. Man carries guilt like some people carry oxygen. Necessary. Constant. Slowly suffocating him. Maybe you should tell him he doesn't need to carry it anymore. Maybe you're the only person whose forgiveness he'll actually accept. That evening, Ivory found Echo in the training yard. He was working with Ranger, the German shepherd who'd been with him during the Kandahar attack. The dog was older now, gray around the muzzle, moving a little slower but still sharp, still devoted, still the partner who'd run 2 miles at full sprint when the compound started burning. They looked good together, Ivory said from the fence line. Echo turned, offered a tired smile. Ranger's the only reason I survived the last 8 years. Only thing that kept me from giving up when the nightmares got bad. When the guilt said I should have died with everyone else. You couldn't have saved them, Ivory said. Couldn't have stopped what happened. The attack was too coordinated, too planned, too perfect. I should have been there, Echo's voice broke. Should have been in the compound, should have died with my team. You were exactly where you needed to be. Ivory stepped closer, on patrol, keeping Ranger safe. Surviving so that when everything burned, someone would be left to carry the story. Someone would remember. Someone would make sure the world knew what we built in that compound wasn't just dogs and handlers. It was family. Echo's hands were shaking. I thought I'd lost you. Thought I'd failed everyone. The handlers. The dogs, you, thought I'd have to carry that failure forever. You didn't fail, Ivory said firmly. You survived. That's not failure. That's the hardest thing you can do. Wake up every day knowing everyone's gone. Keep breathing when it feels easier to stop. Keep living when living means remembering everything you lost. Ranger moved between them, pressing against Echo's leg. The dog knew, could sense the emotional weight shifting in the space between two people who'd been separated by fire and found each other in ashes. I'm glad you're here, Echo said quietly. Glad you didn't actually die. Glad I get a chance to know you again. Know the person you became after everything we survived. I'm different now, Ivory warned. Not the same handler you knew in Kandahar. Harder, more cautious. Carrying scars that don't show but never really heal. I'm different too, Echo replied. But maybe he stepped closer, maybe we can figure out who we are now, together. Not rushing. Not pretending the past didn't happen. Just existing in the same space. Learning each other again. Remembering what it feels like to not be alone. Ivory reached out, found his hand. Their fingers intertwined with the easy familiarity of people who trusted each other with their lives in a different war. Around them, 50 dogs settled into evening routines. Fed, exercised, cared for by handlers who were slowly learning what it meant to see the animals as partners instead of equipment. The facility was changing, healing, becoming something that honored its origins while building toward a better future. And at the center of it all, 2 survivors stood in the fading light, holding hands and remembering that family wasn't just what you were born into. Sometimes family was who stayed, who fought, who refused to let you disappear even when disappearing felt safer than being seen. What defines legacy? Not what we leave behind. What grows from what we plant? What survives long after we're gone? What transforms tragedy into something that might someday look like hope? 3 weeks passed. The facility transformed in ways both visible and subtle. new training protocols, revised handler certifications, behavioral assessment standards that prioritized animal welfare alongside operational readiness. Ivory's office became a gathering place. Handlers stopped by with questions, with concerns, with dogs who needed extra attention. She never turned anyone away, never dismissed a question as stupid or beneath her expertise. Every interaction was treated with the same quiet patience she'd shown Storm in that first kennel. Derek Vance proved to be her most dedicated student. The chief petty officer who'd thrown a broom at her feet now spent hours learning canine psychology, trauma response, ethical partnership models. He worked with Rex daily, slowly building the kind of trust the Belgian Malinois had given Ivory immediately. It was harder for Derek. Rex didn't have genetic memory of Derek's kindness, didn't have ancestral recognition to smooth the path. Every bit of progress required patience, consistency, the willingness to fail and try again. But Derek kept showing up, kept learning, kept proving that people could change if they were willing to do the work. Amber Nash struggled more. Her pride fought against the humility required for genuine growth, but she came to training sessions, asked questions, worked with Storm under Ivory's supervision, slowly learned that strength wasn't dominance, that leadership wasn't control, that the best handlers were those who could admit they didn't have all the answers. Mason Briggs apologized formally, not just to Ivory, but to the entire facility during a morning briefing. Stood in front of his peers and admitted he'd hazed someone without knowing her story, without considering her humanity, without recognizing his own cruelty. It was uncomfortable, humiliating, necessary. Ivory accepted his apology with grace, told him that acknowledgement was the first step, that real change came in the daily choices that followed. Caleb Reeves became an unexpected ally. His technical expertise, previously used for mockery and social media content, redirected toward documenting the new training methods. He filmed sessions showing handlers working with traumatized dogs, created educational content explaining PTSD in military working animals, built a database of success stories and setback patterns that helped inform treatment approaches. His transformation was perhaps the most visible. From someone who'd participated in cruelty to someone actively working to prevent it. Fern Cooper flourished. With Ivory's guidance, she developed specialized treatment protocols for combat traumatized dogs, created care plans that integrated veterinary medicine with behavioral therapy, established herself as an expert in her own right, someone whose voice carried weight in discussions about animal welfare. And through it all, Echo remained, not officially assigned to the facility, not part of the formal chain of command, but present, visible, working alongside Ivory to rebuild something that had been destroyed 8 years earlier. Their relationship stayed undefined. Neither quite friends, neither quite colleagues, neither quite whatever they might have been if Kandahar had never happened. But they were family. That much was clear. Family built from shared trauma and mutual survival. Family that understood what it meant to wake up breathing when so many others hadn't. Commander Hayes watched the transformation with quiet satisfaction. His gamble on Ivory had paid off beyond expectations. The facility's operational readiness improved, handler retention increased, dog welfare metrics reached levels unprecedented in naval special warfare K-9 programs. But more than statistics, something fundamental had shifted. The culture, the understanding, the recognition that these animals deserved more than efficiency and mission completion. They deserved respect. Partnership. The acknowledgement that their service came with costs invisible to anyone who'd never watched a dog choose to die protecting their handler. One evening, as the sun painted the Virginia coast in shades of amber and gold, Ivory stood in Alpha Block, Rex at her side, Storm pressed against her other leg, 50 dogs in their kennels, calm and content, representing bloodlines that stretched back to Kandahar, back to handlers who'd given everything, back to animals who'd protected one surviving woman because somewhere in their genetic memory lived the knowledge that she'd protected them first. Echo found her there, Ranger following at his heel. The old German shepherd moved slower now, but with the dignified patience of a dog who'd earned his rest. They stood together in companionable silence, watching the facility settle into night. After a long moment, Ivory spoke. "The message I got 3 weeks ago. The one about the eighth star. You know about that?" Echo didn't sound surprised. "Hayes showed me the text. We've been investigating, tracing the number, analyzing the language, trying to figure out if it's a genuine threat or someone playing games. Have you found anything?" "Not yet," Echo admitted, "but we will. And whatever's out there, whatever truth is still hiding in the shadows of Kandahar, we'll face it, together." Ivory looked down at the tattoo on her left forearm. 7 stars. 7 handlers who died protecting their dogs, protecting her. Protecting a program they'd built with love and dedication and the kind of loyalty that transcended rank or mission parameters. "Who's the 8th star?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," Echo said, "but I think we're going to find out. And when we do, when whatever darkness is still lurking finally shows itself, we won't be alone. We have this facility, these handlers, these dogs, we have each other." Rex howled, long and mournful, a sound that carried across the compound and was immediately answered by 49 other voices. Storm joined in, then Ranger, then Titan, then every dog whose bloodline traced back to that burning compound in Afghanistan. They sang together, perfect harmony, a chorus of recognition and remembrance in something that sounded almost like hope. The handlers emerged from buildings to listen. Derek, Amber, Caleb, Mason, Fern, Silas, all of them drawn by the sound. All of them standing witnesses to something they couldn't fully understand but felt in their bones. This was legacy. This was family. This was what survived when everything else burned. Ivory felt tears on her face, didn't bother wiping them away. 8 years she'd carried the weight alone. 8 years of believing she was the only one who remembered, the only one who mourned, the only one who understood what had been lost, but she wasn't alone anymore, had never been alone. The dogs had remembered, had passed the knowledge down through generations, had waited for her to come home so they could show her that some bonds don't break, some loyalty doesn't fade. Some love survives fire and loss, and all the years between then and now. Echo's hand found hers. His grip was warm and steady and real. "We're going to be okay," he said. "Not today, not tomorrow, maybe not for a long time, but eventually we're going to wake up and realize we're more than our trauma, more than our survival, more than the sum of everything we lost." "What will we be?" Ivory asked. "Family," Echo said simply. "The kind that chooses each other, the kind that stays, the kind that refuses to let the past dictate the future, the kind worth fighting for." Rex pressed harder against Ivory's leg. Storm whined softly. Ranger settled at Echo's feet with a contented sigh. Around them, the facility existed in that perfect moment between day and night, between past and future, between loss and healing. Somewhere in the darkness, maybe a threat waited. Maybe the 8th star would reveal itself. Maybe the people who destroyed Kandahar would resurface. But for now, in this moment, surrounded by dogs and handlers and family built from ashes, Ivory felt something she hadn't felt in 8 years. Peace. Not the absence of pain, not the forgetting of trauma, but the quiet knowledge that she didn't have to carry everything alone anymore. That strength wasn't about endurance. It was about allowing yourself to be seen, to be helped, to be held by people who understood the weight. The howling faded, the dogs settled. The handlers returned to their duties, but something had changed, something fundamental and irreversible. The facility wasn't just a training center anymore. It was home, it was family. It was proof that even in the aftermath of devastating loss, something new could grow, something worthy, something that honored the sacrifice while building toward a future where that sacrifice meant something more than tragedy. Ivory looked at Echo, at Rex, at Storm. At the 50 dogs whose ancestors had died protecting her and whose descendants would do the same without hesitation. "I'm staying," she said. "Not as a consultant, not as someone passing through. I'm staying, making this official, making this home." "Good," Echo said, "because we need you, I need you. And because running got you through the last 8 years, but staying is how you heal. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Sometimes strength isn't about fighting or surviving or enduring alone. It's about recognizing when you've found your people, your family, your place in a world that tried to destroy you but failed. Ivory had walked into this facility invisible, dismissed, judged by her appearance and her silence and the assumptions people made about someone who cleaned kennels. But the dogs had known better, had recognized her before any human ever did, had passed down through bloodlines and genetic memory the knowledge that this small, quiet woman was worth protecting, worth honoring, worth remembering. And now, standing in Alpha Block with Echo beside her and 50 dogs settling into peaceful evening, Ivory finally understood. She hadn't survived Kandahar to hide, hadn't endured 8 years of isolation to remain invisible. She'd survived to teach, to heal, to show the next generation of handlers what real partnership looked like, to honor the legacy of those who died by making their sacrifice mean something. The sun disappeared below the horizon. The facility's lights flickered to life. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, a woman who'd been a ghost for 8 years finally allowed herself to be real, to be seen, to be home.